Alright, this should be an interesting one today. Greetings. Welcome to Evil Dojo. We'll be getting started here in a few minutes. But today I'm going to be talking about C and C++. Specifically C++, but its relationship to C. I haven't fucked with classes in a long time, like objects, right? A lot of the C and C++ that I've written over the last couple years has been mostly classless in terms of I've not been writing my own classes. I've been using type-def struct for a lot of my actual data structures and writing associated functions to manipulate them. But for some reason, I'm not exactly sure why, I'm starting to feel like maybe I could benefit from some classes. There are certain organizational steps in the game development process that, in my case, could be probably smoothed out a bit better if I just had a few classes for some things. So we're going to see how we can work through that, see what organization might work best for me, and at the same time, I'm going to try and rant and ramble about like how to manage objects in a way where it's easy. I'm going to talk about the basics of syntax for creating new objects as well as removing them. I talk about how we can make things easier and life easier on ourselves when working with certain things, and see if we can find good ways to like reasonably avoid some of the common pitfalls associated with working with memory in general, right? One of the biggest arguments against C and C++ is its prevalence of memory corruption bugs due to mismanagement of pointers. But just using a new language like Rust isn't going to magically solve those problems for you. Understanding the architecture of the software that you've written, understanding where things are going and how they're being used, and always making sure to implement good error checking practices. That's a long story short of like how we can avoid some of that shit. Like, so we're going to talk C++, we're going to talk Raylib, we're going to talk getting shit done, son. Won't be able to be live for too long today, maybe like an hour for this session anyway. I'll probably get back on afterwards. Alright, just about to start here. I think I gotta fix my stream shit. Hi Skippy, what's up? Sorry I haven't started yet. Just getting a few things taken care of real quick. Hope you're having a good day. Day is barely just began cranking. Let's see. I gotta update the stream category. There we go. Hey you. Hey Grace. Here. All right, let me have a smoke real quick. Well, cannabis in general helps relax my body and mind. So yes, a lot of people may not see a direct correlation, and in fact, many people are right to question whether or not one should program while under the influence of cannabis. However, I've never found it to be a problem. In fact, if anything, it increases my ability to be creative at problem solving. But the more important point is that it's a pain reliever. I'm an old man. I'm going to be 40 next year. And I got lots of achy joints. I've got titanium plates on my spine. And I got a fucked up right hand. So I think I can be excused. I'm sure you understand. For what it's worth, I've primarily consumed cannabis as a medical user and not like someone who smokes for like social or party reasons. There's a lot of people in the world, professionals in their industries, incredibly skilled, talented people who work in positions where one might think that their judgment or ability to perform is compromised as a result of the consumption of cannabis. But in fact, oftentimes, like you say, does make them sharper and more able to do stuff. I like looking at, there's a great example from a movie called Super High Me. And one of the guys in there, I forget his name, I'd have to look him up, but he was a lawyer or like a trader, like a day trader or some shit, who was one of the only people in the whole country to get access to a very special government medical marijuana program. a federal one, where they selected like 10 people, and I think 4 of them or 5 of them died. Most of them might be dead now, but there's still a handful of people who are to this day receiving shipments of marijuana from the government because they were grandfathered into a particular program where they were, basically doing like studies to see whether or not it actually helps these people. And in many people's cases, like this one dude who has like bone spurs that grow all across his body, the cannabis helps, relieve that pain. Very similar to, no, not died from weed, but died from like their various, in many cases, I think they were just old. Like the program was like set up like a super long time ago. I'm talking like 60s or 70s, and or maybe even 80s. But the program got discontinued, but the individuals who were still in the program got grandfathered in, so that they didn't get like stiffed out of the deal. So yeah, let me smoke. I'm gonna sit on my couch next to my dog so that she doesn't get too grumpy, and we'll get started. Have that. Hey, you better not fall off that couch while I step outside. Jesus. Come on. There we go. Yeah. All right, one side, Grace. Okay. All right, let me move my keyboard. Let me move my microphone. Let me move my coffee. And let's fucking go. I got this friend I met recently. Really cool guy. A lot younger than me. But honestly, it's really hard to tell who is or isn't younger than me nowadays. It's a pretty straightforward, easy assumption that most people are younger than me. But for what it's worth, when I was 11 years old, maybe 12. First of all, can y'all hear me? Is my audio good? I mean, I basically have it on like filterless right now, and I've got the volume jacked up to max. So you should be able to hear me. Maybe if I change the position, it's not like exactly in front of my face. But like when I was, 12, 13, I got this book, Learn C++ in 21 days. Well, I'm 25, 26 years later, and I feel like I know it. There was a comic in a presentation I gave on abandoning Unity. I was invited to a game developer conference, a Unity conference, and I gave a talk on not using Unity. Real shit. Yo, Dulce, how's it going, man? Shout out to Dulce. You've been one of the most consistent viewers of my stream. I can't thank you enough because I need more people like you. Not only do you consistently show up and watch, you also chat. You actually have interesting and insightful things to say. And that's the kind of people that I want in my community. Yeah, I think it's very easy to define, like, good qualities, more than bad ones, right? Because it's like, if you look across YouTube nowadays, you got so many people like doing videos trying to tear other people down, and like essentially what the kids are calling farming, right? Where you're hate farming or you're watch farming. And like I think it's a better idea to, like, if you're gonna farm, to farm on ideas rather than people. No, dude, you don't even have to try. You just are. That's what I like about you. Like there's no fake, pretentious bullshit. Like that's not, like the fact that you like actually say that you like Lisp is is all the proof that I need that you're not a bot and you're an actual human. Because that's a hot take if I've ever heard one. I would much rather fucking write shit in Lisp than do any fucking thing with Unity. Real talk. And similarly, so, okay, back to my story. I got this friend, he's a developer, I just met him, he's actually a neighbor. Cool guy, much younger than myself. It's like about a 10-year age gap. And it shows in our culture, right? Like, the animes that I grew up with are not the animes that he grew up with. I started programming much earlier in my life than he did his own. But that said, though, it's better late than never. Everyone comes into this game at a different point. That's what I like about it. Everyone's got their own perspective. Everyone's got their own shit. You know what? This is actually a great format for like a podcast. To me, to just like show my terminal and ramble. I know I titled the stream C++, and we're gonna get to it, but there is some backstory. And I realized that I had to do this because is he trying to create some pressure, and I know he's probably not intending to. He's just kind of a intimidating person because of how tall he is, honestly. I'm a short dude myself, and he's a very tall dude, so, there is a level of, like, come into this guy's home and, like, not, like, totally take over his shit, right? But, like, on the same token, when this dude sees what I do versus what he does in the tech world, like our ways of operating and navigating cyberspace, right? We operate differently. He's a C#.NET front-end JavaScript type dev. I'm a command line, Linux, no Visual Studio Code, NeoVim, do it yourself, learn how the thing is built before you build the thing type dude. And problem is, I want to collaborate on a project. We obviously both are interested in making games. I'm kind of on the research and development side of things, where I'm really exploring this space of like, what is my preferred way to make something? Because the last thing that I want to do is be forced into a situation where I have to conform to some other system's way of doing things. On one level, this is kind of something that you have to do if you want to pick up any API, right? It's kind of something expected that to some degree, within the constraints of like your chosen language, within the constraints of your chosen IDE, your chosen frameworks, there is a level of conformity that you have to adhere to in order to just use the thing, right? Like, let's say you have a hammer. You can't use that hammer without picking up the hammer, right? Now, picking up the hammer is a constraint. That doesn't say you can't pick the hammer up with your feet. If you're able to, that's kind of impressive. Some people can't pick things up off the ground with their feet. I can, because I'm part monkey. And I developed that ability to combat the fact that I'm not able to do it with my right hand very easily. The way that my body is shaped due to the scoliosis curvature, there is a very big left-leaning tendency because my body is slowly trying to kill itself. That's why I had to get the titanium plates. So there's a reason I do the things I do and the way that I do them. Like, I didn't use Vim for the first 5 years-ish after first learning about it because I didn't know certain things about it. My teacher, the guy who signed my diploma, was hyping up Vim for how efficient it was. He was like, you keep your hands on home row and you navigate with I always flip-flop them. It's either HJKL or JKL semicolon. I forget what the default is for Vim, but it's one of those two. And was I going with that? Help me out. I'm not a boomer, but I'm very well aware of the fact that pretty soon the Gen Xers are going to be the new boomers, and that means immediately after that the millennials are going to be the new boomers. And that's a problem. It means I'm about to be a boomer. I'm 2 generations away from being old man as fuck. And that's scary. There's parts of my childhood I have not fulfilled yet. So while I am still a young and viral man, and I mean viral, whatever that word is, I'm a viral man. I'm a young man. I'm 39 years young. And there's a big generation gap in the way that not only we do things, but also a culture gap in the way that we do things. And something about his education really made him not like or even want to fuck with anything related to do with manually mallocking memory, manually managing memory, working with pointers, all that kind of stuff. Welcome back, Skippy. Just talking about why I'm doing this C++ stuff. So something about my friend's education really scared him. He had a very bad experience in school, and now he doesn't want to fuck with C or C++. Here's the problem. That's all I really want to fuck with. That's all I really want to actually code in. There's very little outside of that I'm that interested in that I'm gonna take the time to actually sit down and learn anymore. A lot of my energy to pick up and learn new tools and stuff like that really kind of faded out in my mid-30s or so. There was a point before that, especially like, let's see, what year was this? Like 2015-ish, like when Swift first came out, and there were a lot of other languages that were kind of popping up in the awareness of developers, such as Go and Rust, around this time, as well as D, and I feel like there's another one. And even since then, there have been so many other languages that have come out. Yeah, exactly. Dare you say Rust, right? Like, I'm saying to my friend, like, I'm trying to say to him anyway. I don't know. It's very hard for me to get real with people when people present this level of aggression and energy with their, approach. Because it kind of, like, I'm not trying to be an aggressive person. I'm not trying to be all hard and tough all the time. But, like, I would much rather write a whole fucking game in Rust than actually, like, learn Unity. I would much rather learn Rust than learn Unity. Just real talk. In terms of, like, utility, potential, and, like, making a bet on, like, what's going to be the most universally useful, sitting down and, like, figuring out Unity and figuring out, like, all the different shits, and then picking up enough C# to, like, work with its scripting language. I don't want to have to move the mouse around. I don't want to have to click stuff. I don't want to have to drag stuff. I don't want to have to learn yet another framework just to be able to do shit that I'm thinking of doing. Like, when I think put text on screen, I just want to put the text on the screen. I don't have to learn how to fucking make a UI menu object that you, like, link with other shit, and you have to fucking do some, like, bullshit ass, like, visual based object management. I'm not about that. I'm not about that at all. My brain is like text mode. At some point in my early 20s, when I was first really smoking a lot of weed and I was in school, I had this revelation that everything is just text. Everything is just characters. Plain text is the universal truth. If everything in the universe is ones and zeros, all of that shit encodes to text. All of that shit encodes to plain text. All of that shit is just ASCII. Right? Right? That's what I'm talking about, Dulce. That's exactly what I'm fucking talking about. If I throw myself at Unity, all I can do is make shit in Unity. Right? But then I'm like put into a position where I have to pick up C Sharp. I don't want to have to pick up C Sharp. I'm not trying to become a .NET dev. I'm not trying to work on the Windows stack like that. The only reason I would fuck with .NET and C Sharp is if I were actively training to become a red team penetration tester. Because I would want to understand the underlying architecture of .NET applications and like Microsoft Windows applications in general at a certain point. Long ago, the Windows API was all C++. I'm sure it's all C Sharp nowadays. So, where was I going with that? Help me out. I'm an old man. I forget things quickly. Actually, I've always forgotten things quickly because I have like super low like RAM in my brain. The only way I've been able to like actively expand my brain like that, like my RAM capacity, is by eliminating clutter and also taking psychedelics. So, like, he already understands that I don't want to fuck with Unity. I'm pretty sure. But then, he asked me, would you try Godot? I said, I'd rather do Godot than Unity. It's real talk. Like, if gun to my head, Unity or Godot, I'm going to go Godot. But even then, 5 minutes of Googling for one simple thing, and I'm presented with all this extra shit that I didn't ask for. When I was Googling to like get like a simple screenshot of like the Godot like user interface, instead what it gave me was how to make a UI in Godot. And I got unnecessarily upset. I began to rage. Legit, like scrolling through Google results on my phone. I was actually raging. I saw some of the things on how... I'm like, my dude said it would take me 6 days to pick up Godot. And just looking at, like, the results on this Google, I got the impression that it was going to take me weeks for each individual thing just to like feel good and get confident and stuff with working in it. And I'm like, nah, that's too long. I don't have that much time. I don't want to have to click and move shit around on the screen. I don't want to have to click and drag wires. I think that shit's retarded. Virtually, physically, mentally, all three. Really, Skippy? Sorry, there is a bit of a chat delay, so, I do apologize, but that does give me time to, like, actually finish a ramble before I look up at the chat. I should do a stream where I do like real time chat and just see how that kind of feels for people and for me. I'm sure I've got the bandwidth for it. The problem is with the real time chat thingy. I think you can't rewind the stream. So like at the very least you'd be able to like catch what's already up or like scroll back if you need to. So I'm already really fucking put off by Godot. I'm getting the same kind of like gut instinct revulsion that I got when I sat down to try and do like a React.js tutorial. My problem with React.js tutorial out of the box was that in the tutorial itself, it has me download some zip file package type deal that's over 100 fucking megabytes big. That's a fat bitch. Why the fuck do you have to download that much shit for a Hello World tutorial to make web pages? That shit makes no sense. That's not the future I signed up for. That's not the universe I want to live in. I can appreciate the existence of shit. I would probably rather fuck with it. Like if I'm gonna do shit like this, I might as well use Game Maker Studio. JS Kit, what's up? How you doing, man? Happy Wednesday. Happy Hump Day. We are almost a week into the 8th month of the year, August. And I'm rambling about why I want to much rather work with certain tools than others. And a lot of it comes down to user experience. The user being the developer in this case. The way that my brain works, the way that I've kind of thought about code and software and programming in general, is realistically all of the programming actually happens when you're not inputting shit. Like when I'm sitting here just talking and thinking, this is where the real programming happens, right? Programming is a mental activity, something that happens in your brain. The act of building and putting things together and trying things out is kind of a separate, like, actual task. But in the process of doing so, you know, we kind of unify these two ideas together. And I think that's what most people think of as programming. But realistically, like, the act of actually solving the problem versus building the solution to the problem, these are two separate things, for me anyway. And one of the reasons I generally don't fuck with IDEs is I hate using the mouse. You know, and there's ways to kind of operate in a mouseless-ish way. But in some cases, it really can't be avoided. I'm going to do some videos soon on breaking down, like, what puts me off about Visual Studio Code, for instance. Because so many people use it. I think the people who do use it and like it can't fathom why other people don't like it. So I don't actually, I'm not actually using a full tiling manager right now. I'm actually using XFCE4, which has some tiling capability, but not certainly to the same degree as other window managers like i3M or Awesome. I actually used to use Awesome Window Manager like all the time on Gentoo until I discovered XFCE. One of the reasons that I don't really use Awesome or i3M is there's far too much configuration involved, and I just, like I said, I'm getting old, and I don't generally want to have to fuck with that shit. My experience with XFCE4 has been so great, though. Like, absolutely phenomenal. It has such a small memory footprint that it has virtually zero impact on how much available like resources you have. Naturally, I'm rocking a very beefy setup right now, so it doesn't really impact me. I could really justify at this point using something more heavyweight if I really wanted to, but I like XFCE4 so much that I just keep using it. You know, I could put on KDE with all the bells and whistles, make it fully fucking 3D and shit, and just like really like big dick wag, you know, pull my nutsack out and just like hang it in front of everybody type shit because of how much resources I got. Look how much RAM I'm rocking right here. Tell me if you know anyone who has this much RAM. I'm probably one of the only motherfuckers that y'all know who got 128 fucking gigs of RAM. It says 125 GIB because GIB is like a different measure. Plus there might also be like some sort of reserve setup going on. Y'all got 128 gigs of RAM? Because I got 128 gigs of RAM. The question is, why don't you have 128 gigs of RAM? I got 128 gigs of RAM, and look how many I'm using. I'm only using 14. And even then, you're probably like, damn, that's a lot of usage. Why are you using 14? And that's because I did something a little crazy. I don't have a swap disk. That's right. I am flying with no swap disk. All the shit is happening in memory. And to be honest, I've never had a problem since I built this machine. The only problem that I had with this machine was in the very beginning. The SSD that I had apparently, was known for having some flaws, and every so often the motherboard would fail to detect the SSD or fail to read from it, or like think that it was disconnected, and like my system would just it would be rendered totally unusable. So to prevent that problem, thank you. No, I appreciate that. I am a madman. That was exactly the vibe I was going for. Villains aren't born, they're made. They're shaped by the forces around them. They're shaped by society. They emerge out of the nether because it was inevitable. So yeah, I'm rocking this kind of resources because I could, because my grandmother died, my grandfather died, I was left with some money, and I said, life is short. I have the resources now. I can build a really fucking nice machine. And I did. And I'm not even doing anything that crazy with it right now. We're just streaming. What can you do with 128 gigs of RAM? One of the things I like to do is I can mount very large temporary file systems. So like on a moment's notice, I can just like block off 32 gigs of RAM and use it as a dedicated in-memory file system. So I can copy files to it and operate and work on them over there so that I'm not like actively writing or fucking with my disk. I used to do this a long time ago on Mac because I had to, because Xcode was so goddamn slow that I had to not only upgrade my RAM, but also mount a temporary space that Xcode would operate out of for its like temp folder, just to like speed up operation. But to be fair, that Mac is actually so old, it has a real physical hard drive still. It doesn't have an SSD. Okay, so on the topic of LLMs, Dulce, uh, I have models, right? Like, so I've got some DeepSeek, I've got some Llama, I got some Phi, and I got some Quen, and these are some older ones too. But it's like I've learned some things about how you actually run these things, right? So my friend came over and he's got his own LLM set up, and he had a very nice laptop with a 4090 in it. He had a fucking 4090 in his goddamn laptop. And the motherfucker dropped the shit outside my apartment when he was leaving one night because he left his backpack unzipped. And that fucking sucks. I heard that shit bang, and apparently the fan got damaged, and the machine still boots, but I felt kind of bad because that's an expensive laptop. Last time I watched anyone drop a laptop was my sister, and she broke the screen because she was carrying the laptop with one hand, and one of her dogs jumped up on her while she was moving into another room, scared her, dropped the laptop, the screen broke. It still booted, but it just needed screen repair. See, the thing with laptops is I don't necessarily believe in a beefy laptop. I think laptops should be very lightweight and thin and smooth and super easy to carry, and relative built-in damage protection and all that kind of shit. I would so much rather sacrifice like processing power for like lightweightness. So with running these local models, so in my graphics card I've got a 3080 with 32 gigs of RAM, and with that much RAM, I'm able to actually fit some of these smaller models completely inside my video card's RAM, and so that way I can take advantage of like full, like the goal being you want to load your model entirely into the GPU, because if you try to like segment out like the memory of where shit is loaded so that like part of it's in RAM and part of it is in your VRAM, then shit's gonna run so much slower than it otherwise could. So ideally you actually fit everything into your VRAM. So my dude got a 4090, but he only had 16 gig VRAM. So this is native Linux. I'm rocking native Linux on my desktop here. It's actually Debian. .1. Name of my machine is Masamune, after the sword from Chrono Trigger, which is actually named off of a real historical Japanese blacksmith. Masamune and Murasame, I believe, were competing blacksmiths. So where was I going with that? Kind of got segued. So I was responding to Dulce about running local models, and yeah, the models are like, from what I understand, they just run faster if you do it entirely in video RAM. Like if you don't have a video card, you could attempt to like load shit into your local RAM and then run it off of your CPU, but CPU token generation is so much slower, you know? So the problem is with these lower spec models. Oops. You know, they're just not that great. But I do need to actually probably download a couple new ones, like maybe grab the Q4s. You know, maybe I don't need full 8-bit quantization. Maybe I could get away with something lower. Now that's pretty good. Like, now that's actually really good to hear. Because like figuring out like the optimal model for someone's hardware is definitely kind of like a tuning challenge, right? Like you have to try one thing out, see how well it works. And so like my first approach here was like figure out which of these actually fits inside my VRAM and runs at full speed without like hang up, right? Because the moment that I notice like performance degradation is the moment where I have to ask myself, is the performance degradation such that like the output is still reasonable enough that I can deal with any sort of slowdown and count it as a acceptable loss? You know what I mean? Because like, as an example, when using the Open Router APIs, I like working with DeepSeek Chat so much more than working with Claude Sonnet, right? And the reason being, while I have gotten things correct with fewer steps, sometimes when like DeepSeek gets stuck, I'll bust out Claude and it'll kind of like one-shot a solution pretty well. But like when doing like longer tasks, Claude requires constant correction, always gives me more output than I actually need, wastes tokens, and I almost feel like on a certain degree my inner tinfoil hat is like they're intentionally wasting tokens to like force people to pay more. And that's fucked up. The problem with streaming and doing these local models is that, first of all, who the fuck's calling me? Unknown number. I don't answer phones that I don't know who they coming from. So, where was I going with all that? Oh yeah, so I'm running OBS with the GPU enhanced processing. So that's one reason that like my CPU usage right now is still super low. Like, you see over here, it's even while streaming right now, I'm only using 1.53, 1.64 in the last minute of my 12 physical CPUs. And that's pretty fucking good. If I were using regular OBS and I wasn't using GPU enhanced processing, a lot of that would get deferred to the CPU and my CPU usage would be a lot higher right now. I should actually do a video comparing the two. There's a lot of little tiny tech things that I want to start throwing out there. Like part of my problem is like I have difficulty. Well, that's not true. I like sometimes I like to bounce from like thing to thing, and the idea of doing like a really long form video that like if I'm not like attempting to one shot the video, and I'm not very good at like breaking the things up, but I am very good at like taking what I already have and then adding to it. And so whenever I'm doing like any sort of project like that, like like in the past I've done some music videos where I straight up like did the whole thing in one sitting, and I had this like fervor to like crank it out, but like when it comes to making like a longer form video where I have to like do annotation and narration and then like stitch things together, I almost kind of feel like I have to do it that same way, because if I don't, then I'm never going to actually make anything. Okay, where am I at? Oh yeah. All right, we're gonna make a brand new repo for this. First thing you always do with any C++ project from scratch, or at least this is what I do. I just noticed that Wordle and World are only one character flipped away from each other. All right. In the beginning, there was Hello World. This is everybody's first computer science program. It's the thing that they always teach you first. And even then, like, even this first little tiny program gives a brand new student very many questions to ask. What does include? What is CSTDIO? Why do you need arrow brackets around it? What is CSTDlib? What is int? What is main? Why do you need parentheses after the main? What is a curly bracket doing here? Why do you need a closing one down here? Why do all of these lines have semicolons at the end of them, but the includes don't? What's printf? Why are we printing the text hello world? What's this \n? Why do you have to put it all in double quotes? What's return? Why are we returning 0? That's a lot of questions. You can understand why some people have difficulty getting started. But for a lot of us, this is our bread and butter. This is so dumb obvious to anybody with half a brain that looks at it as like, what are you, fucking retarded? No, you're not retarded. You're just inexperienced. This is the first program that anybody writes, generally speaking. No matter what language you're working in, you're basically doing the same thing. You're printing some text to the screen. Printing out to standard out is one of the first and most important things that a programmer can learn how to do. And in fact, you kind of have to in order to like actually be able to do any sort of observation on any sort of computation that you're doing. Kind of seems obvious if you think about it, but at the same time, we question everything here. Always be questioning. Always ask, why are we doing this? And always ask, is there a better way? So, we have our own make file we just wrote. Essentially what it does is allows us to run make in the command line and follow whatever rules that we specify in the make file. So as an example here, we're using some shortcuts. So I generally follow this pattern where like you have a rule for all, which is like what happens when you just type make. And then you have sub rules for each one of those different targets. So in this case, we're targeting the main by saying we want to build a program that's called main, or a binary file rather. And it depends on us having a main.cpp in this directory. So if we have a main.cpp, then G++ gets executed. G++ is a compiler for C++. The GNU C compiler's C++ extension. $caret is a shortcut in make syntax that says take our inputs, whatever's listed after the colon on the target line, and then pass them in as input. And then we have -O and then $@ which says take the target and put that here in the output. So this command will effectively expand to g++ main.cpp-o main. That's what it effectively translates to. But this is a nice little rule because we can actually copy and paste this into other targets if we need to. So most of the rules that I use, I'm going to be using these kind of like shortcuts. A good specification is to actually define a binary file. So if we have like a main and we want to call it main, then we should specify that in a variable and then use that variable in all of the appropriate locations. So now if we go back here and we do make clean, and we do make again, you can see it still executes. There's no change, but it's a little bit easier to manage and extend now. So I've got just enough time here for us to do a little bit of actual OOP. Let's say we were making a game, because I'm going to be doing this pretty soon. So we're going to define a class called game. This class contains what we call public and private sections. Anyone who's written Java will recognize this. So let's say we want a window title, or like some sort of string of text that like represents the game. Maybe it's the name of the game. So we're going to define a property on this class called string name. Now you see we have an error when we did that. It doesn't know what string is, because in C++, we're expected to do this kind of thing, where what you'll actually see people doing, and this is kind of like where my own style preference comes in. You'll see people doing this shit every fucking where. And it makes the code really hard to read. Where you have to put std::: in front of every fucking function or object or whatever that uses it. Instead, what I like to do, and a lot of people, oh, but no, you're going to have namespace conflicts. It's like, no, I'm not. That shit's not going to happen. We can just do this, and now we can actually just use string in all the places where we need to below it. It's very nice. Very, very nice. So let's create a constructor. So in C++, when you're defining like the methods that actually fall onto a class, what you end up doing is you do the name of the class followed by : and then the name of the method. And here we can actually assign the property. Actually, I think we might have to, this may or may not error out on me. Okay, no, that's cool. It's all right with that. So, it's been so long. But actually, if there was an error, my LSP would have caught it. So because name is private, we have no way to print it out, right? Like, if you try to, say on the next line, print out just game name, right? You try to go, oh, well, first of all, we haven't even instantiated a game object. So to instantiate a game object, you would be like game G, or call it game. So we create a game on the stack inside of main. Now, let's say we want to try and print the name of that game. We have no way to, we have nothing that we can actually call or access here. Try to do dot. It's not giving me anything. Reason being, because name is private, we have to do what we call create a construct, or like an accessor method. So now down here, when I do dot, the get name method gets recognized. Notice that we still have an error, and the reason being because printf comes from the C standard library of input. C has no idea what the fuck a string is. In C, strings are all character pointers. They're all arrays of characters. And so what we have to do is we actually have to take a string and call .cstring, which is a special method on the string class that gives us a pointer to a string that we can then use in different C functions that call for a character pointer rather than like a string. Notice it said undefined reference to getName. And they're very correct. We did not define getName yet. So to define getName, first we take the prototype or the function header, or technically this is a method. The difference between a function and a method is whether or not it's a function that belongs to a class. Class functions are called methods. So now that we have getName and we're inside of the game namespace, we can just return name. And we're good there. And in fact, if we wanted to, so that we didn't have to like call cstring every fucking where, we could even return a constant char pointer for getName instead. Now down here, all we have to do is call getName. So that's how that works. Similarly, we have an opposite to an accessor. Called a setter. And the setter simply updates a property on an object to be whatever is passed in. I am coming up on time here, so I'll probably start wrapping up. So that means that we can do down here now, game.setName project.rpg, and then we can go ahead and print that out again, and we'll see that it gets updated. Boom. So realistically, this is like probably more than most introductory computer science classes would cover in the first week. But you gotta give people like really time to like acclimate to certain ideas and ways of thinking. In my case, this is pretty par for the course. Like, I've been doing this a very long time. So I'm going to be reorganizing a lot of my own game code to kind of follow object-oriented in conjunction with, that's the important part, is that Not to mention, this would also be kind of a good time for me to like really see how I can use meta template programming in order to make my like the composition of my component system easier. Because as it is, like I have to stub out like a new fucking method, or sorry, a series of functions to manipulate each data structure as they create. And I want a way to like given a component enum type, you know, one for each different component type that I have, I want to be able to look up in a map its corresponding data structure. Like, so I'm I'm nowhere near done with C++ just yet. Like I did not spend all of this time getting good to not make some really cool shit. And I really don't want to fuck with Unity. I really don't want to fuck with Godot. I really like Raylib a lot. Hell, I would rather abandon Raylib and go back to libstdl. I would rather work in Rust with Bevy. I would actually rather get good at Rust. I think it would be a better use of my time. It would lead to me not only becoming a better programmer, but also be able to do a lot of things outside of just game development. The reason that I wanted to go back to Rust most recently was because I finally wrapped my head around this idea of lifetimes, I think. Syntactically, I may not have it down, but I think I understand like the purpose and point. Because like when you're tracking pointers and like, you know, keeping track of like who owns what, even if you're using a unique pointer, you can actually create situations where the code compiles, but there's still like a logic error with like how you're navigating memory. And you can actually prevent this using Rust because the compiler will catch the error before it compiles. So it won't even allow it to compile. It has a compile time guarantee on certain things, which is great. You know, it's one of the reasons that we want more, you know, compilation and not like more scripting. Shit, if anything, if all of the JavaScript engines that are running our browsers aren't being actively engineered in Rust, they need to be. Actually using Rust to implement something underneath the hood. Like, LLVM could probably benefit from a Rust rewrite. Or hell, like something there, you know what I mean? All right, so I got like 13 minutes till I gotta go. I mean, I really gotta go now. But I like hanging with you guys. I like talking about this shit. I want to do some cool shit. I had a I dropped a banger tweet on Soding's Twitter recently, because he's also kind of mad at the Rust syntax. Why does the print line require a fucking exclamation point? This is actually a macro, I believe. But still. He has a point. Syntax of Rust is fucking unnecessarily gross at times. My hope is that there's a way for me to kind of work through things. Maybe we'll do some Rust, here soon. But yeah, like I was saying earlier, I do really want to make some video content on like what really rubs me wrong about Visual Studio Code, as well as Unity, and perhaps Godot as well. There's certain ways of doing things, and like I said earlier, my brain is like plain text mode as fuck. Sometimes it's got syntax highlighting, but the universe is an AST, and it's constantly being evaluated. And certain timelines get pruned the fuck off. And I'm trying to prune off that timeline where I do anything with those fucking god-awful tools. But I want to explain to people why. Why don't I fuck with why don't I like Visual Studio Code? Why don't I like Unity? Why don't I like C#? Why don't I want to fuck with all that stuff? Why don't I like Windows? We'll get into all that. But I want to thank y'all for joining today. Got a lot of people watching. I really appreciate it. I love you guys. We're going to get back to this and do some more. We're going to do a lot more programming content. I've been really gaming the hard out as fuck on Skyrim. I think I burned myself out, and now I need to take a breather and actually do like non-gaming stuff for a bit. And yeah, we're going to do some more coding later today. I'll be back for sure. Peace, guys. Love you. Take it easy.